Hi, so I'm Alison Gates and I'm here with Stephen Loftus, and we both work at the Education for Practice Institute at Charles Sturt University. And Stephen's agreed to have a quick chat with me today about how he came to think about learning theories. And I suppose it's been a little bit of a jump from you because you started your career as a dentist. So how did you get from there to thinking, as we do here, about learning theories?
Okay, well, I did start work as a dentist, and then eventually I moved into medical education. First of all, designing computer-based tutorials. And I had to learn how to do that, so I started reading books on things like instructional design, based on behaviourism. And that was fine for a while, but after a while I realised that there was more to education than that. And then I started doing research into education, and that opened up a whole new world for me. And I realised that education, in some ways, is a bit like dentistry. It's a bit like surgery. See, surgery is an umbrella term for lots of different things, and so is an education. And in surgery you need lots of different tools and different techniques for different purposes, and education is just the same. You need a range of different theories, a range of different approaches for doing different jobs. So then I realised that the world of education, like surgery, it was really very big. I mean, if you're going to be an educator, then you have to master and know about a range of different theories and how they work, and when to use them and when not to use them, just as a surgeon does.
So what was the first kind of learning theory that you came across then?
Well, working with computer-based tutorials, instructional design was the one that seemed to fit most of all, based on behaviourism. But then when I moved on to more interactive teaching online with people, then I realised that it just didn't fit. And about that time I started to do research, and I discovered people like Vygotsky, and the great Russian psychologist. And I realised there's a lot of learning theories based on his work, and the kind of work I was doing in education then fitted neatly with his thinking.
So a lot of people feel quite intimidated coming from a practice career, having to sit down and engage with written theory. So what tips can you offer for reading learning theory?
Don't be frightened by it. It can be really interesting, and if you can see how it fits into what you're doing, then it can be really helpful. For example, I started off early on doing problem-based learning, and I realised that Vygotsky's theories were a very good way of explaining and understanding what was happening in a problem-based learning tutorial, because Vygotsky spoke about things like the zone of proximal development, where somebody, a student, learns to do something with somebody who's an expert, and the expert scaffolds their behaviour, their learning, and eventually they can remove that scaffolding so the student can achieve the level of the expert on their own. So with the help of the expert, they start off achieving the competent level, and gradually that's removed. And that's just what was happening in problem-based learning. The students with the tutor were reaching the level of a competent dentist or doctor, and gradually that scaffolding was removed and they were able to do it on their own.
So can you tell us a bit more about Vygotsky?
Well, Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist who lived in the early part of the 20th century. He's sometimes been called as the Mozart of psychology, and there are a lot of similarities because, like Mozart, he died at a young age of TB, and he was very prolific, and he's often been called a genius. So in his short life he produced a huge volume of work, and people say his work is now more relevant than it was when he wrote it. And his work has led into a great many different directions. For example, the work on communities of practice by Wenger was largely inspired by Vygotsky's work. And there are other branches of learning theory, such as cultural historical activity theory. That's becoming very popular. Again, that's largely based on Vygotsky's work. And it helps me to realise that in education you do need a whole range of theories, because what seems to happen is that people get carried away with one theory and they use it as a sledgehammer. So if it seems to solve one particular problem, people think they can solve all their problems with this one theory, and it doesn't work like that. Same as surgery, as I said earlier. In surgery you need a range of different techniques and approaches, and you need to know when to use them and when not to use them. In education it's just the same. You need to know when to use a range of different techniques.
So how does your understanding of learning theories help you grow and develop as a teacher?
Well, I think it's important to have some mastery of learning theories, because it helps you understand what you're doing as a teacher. if you don't have any theoretical background, you're more likely to flounder and stumble through what you're doing and not be able to understand what it is you're doing. So a good learning theory helps you understand what it is you're actually doing with the students and yourself. So it helps you to improve what you're doing and know why you're doing it and why you're improving it and how it can be improved. So learning theories really matter.
So a final question then about our viewers who are workplace learning supervisors. My question is, how do learning theories relate to learning in the workplace?
Well, many people might find that what they're doing is already founded on a really good learning theory. So it helps people to understand what they're doing and why. And you may find there are other things that you'd never thought of that you could do. For example, in workplace learning, what many good educators do is encourage students to be reflective. And there is a whole theory of reflective practice that people can use to help them build on that and encourage the students to be more reflective. So when they are being reflective, they really do engage with what the strengths and the weaknesses of what they've been doing, what they've been engaged with. So reflective practice is just one example of a really useful learning theory for the workplace.
Mm.